Hello, my name's Tonya. I'm a personal trainer and a mum of 5. This is my podcast, Live Yourself Better, and it's for busy people just like you. The Live Yourself Better podcast series is recommended for an adult audience due to the content of some of the subjects discussed. Hello, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the last episode of Series 1 of Live Yourself Better podcast. And today I'll be talking about 3 topics which you might have heard mentioned, you might know a little bit about already, you might not know anything about yet, but I'm guessing you're here because you want to know more. So I'm here to enlighten you and really to talk about mindful eating, primal movement and movement snacking, how those things can be applied to your own life and why they're important. And I'll also be focusing on how especially important these things are during the time of perimenopause and menopause. So stay tuned and find out more. So we'll start off with mindful eating. Perhaps the best way to begin is to think of mindless eating and consider how often when you eat, whether it's a meal or a snack, do you just eat without thinking about it? Perhaps you might be in a hurry because you're between meetings and you're just trying to stuff anything down your throat quickly as possible. Perhaps it might be that you eat whilst reading or looking at your phone or looking at the television, and so you're not really thinking about the act of eating. Or it might be because you're eating for an emotional reason, such as you're bored or lonely, and all of these things contribute to creating distance between us and the art of eating, really. So there's a few things that you can do, and mindful eating is a term. Basically, it comes from the philosophy of mindfulness, which is an old practice, and it's a focus on your thoughts, emotions and physical sensations in the present moment. So I'm referring now to an article in the Harvard School of Public Health, and it's called Mindful Eating. And so it's becoming aware of what you're eating, where it came from, how you're eating it, and it will lead to a greater enjoyment of your food. And there are also studies that show that it can lead to us consuming less food. It says here, a literature review of 68 intervention and observational studies on mindfulness and mindful eating found that these strategies improved eating behaviours such as slowing down the pace of a meal and recognising feelings of fullness and greater control over eating. Slower eating was associated with eating less food as participants felt fuller sooner. Mindfulness and mindful eating interventions appeared most successful in reducing binge eating and emotional eating. However, the review did not show that these interventions consistently reduced body weight. So we don't know. We can't guarantee that. Nothing's guaranteed. But we do know that taking more time over our food and being more mindful about what we're eating can lead to a greater enjoyment of food and could lead to a reduction in the amount of food being eaten. So one of the reasons that I incorporate mindful eating into my work with a client where it's appropriate to do so, and honestly it often is, because it's part of the holistic approach. So where you're looking at everything in your life, what you're eating, how you're eating it, when you're exercising, how, where you're exercising, how you're sleeping, what's your digital health like, all of those factors together, that's where we're saying, okay, this can improve health. And this as well could potentially reduce body weight because you're exercising more, you're moving more and eating less. So how do we mindfully eat? It says in the Harvard article, they give 7 practices of mindful eating. So you might want to go and check out that article. It's harvard.edu. And so for me, what I encourage the clients to do, it aligns with the recommendations they're making there, but really to think about, where has your food come from? Where are you sourcing your food? And obviously that's something that you need to do before the meal. So consider, are you using a local supplier? Do you use organic? Do you have a particular kind of preference for your diet? All of those things, and the quality and the taste. So there are times when you can't consider very deeply all of that. It's just going to be a case of grabbing something. But I do also encourage clients to have meals and snacks prepared for those kind of crisis moments where we don't have much time. But I'll address all of that on another episode in the next series. But for today, really, it's a focus on where the food comes from and who's preparing it and how it's being prepared. And then having that sense of gratitude for having the meal in front of you, taking time to think about it, smell the food before you eat it. You might wish to do some mindful breathing before eating, especially if you're feeling particularly stressed. It's always good to slow down. If you possibly can, just take a moment before eating the food. Appreciate the food, appreciate you have it, but smell it, feel it. Really experience it, and actually engaging your senses in eating, that in itself can be very grounding. So once you bring the food to your mouth, experience the feel of it, the taste of it, how it feels on your tongue. As you're chewing it, concentrate on the chewing and swallowing, and really take in the whole experience of eating, of dining, of nourishing. And that's part of the Live Yourself Better approach, is the nourish. And that's in there because the approach that we take to eating is so important. Now, there was something called the slow food movement, and I'm sure it must still be going. And this was a few years ago I saw this, and it was encouraging people to take the time to eat. Obviously, I acknowledge it's not always possible, but something that you can do is you can minimise distractions. So if you're eating your lunch, try not to eat it at the computer. Try not to scroll through your phone or be hunched over looking at social medias. I'm saying all this because I've done all this and I have to remind myself not to do it. Right? So it's a case, you have to be your own inner parent about this. You have to be strict with yourself. But if you do, it's worth it. Don't sit in front of the television or reading. Just be with the food. And if you can eat in company, then that's brilliant. If you can't, then just let it be you with the food, with that moment, and taking the time to fully enjoy and fully appreciate your meal and observe everything about it. How does your body feel? How do you feel as the food goes towards your stomach? How do you feel when you're starting to feel nourished and feel full? Don't skip meals. I know there's a lot about fasting, intermittent fasting, etc. It's not something I personally recommend. I know it works for some people, so no shade on anybody who's using that method. But when it comes to mindful eating, it's not recommended because it can mess around with how you approach the food. So eat regularly. And in terms of what you're eating, the Eat Well guide is excellent. It's an NHS resource and it can help you to break down visually how you should approach your diet. But also I can help clients with that. So if it's overwhelming, if it's something, I just don't know where to start, I do offer a nutrition only package. I'll read out my website address at the end of the podcast, and it would be great to have a chat. So I do offer a no obligation 40-minute phone or Zoom conversation to see where you're at and how I can help you. And I'm always honest. If I can help you, I will. And if I can't, if it's not right, I'll be honest about that too. So that's mindful eating. I will also put a blog post. There's already a blog post up there actually on my website about it, but I will add some more information to that blog post in the next week or so. Okay, so next we'll talk about movement snacking. What on earth is movement snacking and why is it relevant? Well, really now our lives are sedentary in comparison to our ancestors, and so we have jobs that mean spending long hours sitting down and being inactive. It's just part of our day. And so our ancestors didn't need to think about movement because the demands upon them meant they just had no choice but to move. And it was just part of survival for them. Now for us, it's not. And therefore, we need to think consciously about moving because it's very easy not to when we don't have to. If you imagine you've got to get up and run for your dinner, right? Or you're not getting to eat, you're going to run. Equally, if you imagine that something's chasing you, right? You're going to run. We very fortunately, by and large, don't have those problems in society as a whole. Of course, there are people who don't have enough food or as much food, and that's a whole subject in itself. And I'm, I can't talk about this without acknowledging that. But for many people, we do have food, and we do have the ability to move more, and we just need to remind ourselves to do so. The other problem is that I think the fitness industry is very responsible for leading you to believe that you have to spend money to be active, and that it requires a lot of preparation and you need special equipment. And in fact, you even need to be somewhere else other than at home in a certain setting, etc. And please don't get me wrong, I think there's a very, very valid place for gym memberships. I have one myself and I use it regularly, so it's brilliant. But equally, I have gym equipment at home, and I also exercise at home without any equipment at all. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But I think overall the fitness industry thing and the advertising around fitness can cause people to really overthink things when it comes to exercise. Not just that, the food industry does the same to us with food. Oh, shall I have a little bit of this dressing or that dressing, or I better not have an avocado, and you just overthinking everything all of the time instead of stripping things back and saying, what are we doing on a practical level? And people can talk themselves out of exercise. Oh, I can't go out for a run, it's too cold. I can't go to the gym because I don't know where my trainers are, or I can't wear that top, or I feel too conscious of this, or a million other reasons, right? Because there's always going to be 100 reasons, and they're valid, right? Things like feeling conscious, it's a valid reason. But what's to say that you can't do some sit-ups in front of the telly? Now, as long as you've got enough space to move around and it's safe space to exercise, you're not liable to cause problems to anybody else. So just consider your environment and consider your own abilities before you do any exercise at home. But in terms of movement snacking, it's a simple and effective way to add more physical activity into your day. So whereas you're sitting down for long periods of time, you need to intersperse that with short bursts of movement. Now, you can remind yourself to do this by setting a timer. And it could be something simple like just get up and go for a walk around the office. Instead of taking the lift, take the stairs. I can't stress how important that is. Just think of the opportunities that you have, or the escalator. Instead of taking those, take the stairs. Or perhaps just if you're waiting in the kitchen for the kettle to boil, and again, if there's enough space, safe to do so, do some jumping jacks, or just do some stretches, or do some squats. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach to movement snacking, and I'll talk about primal movements as well at the end of the podcast and how that can relate to movement snacking. The best way with it, really, don't think of movement and exercise as something that's separate from your house, something that's separate from your office. Just try and incorporate those things and think about the bodyweight exercises that you like to do. So do you like to do lunges? Do you like to do squats? Do you like to do press-ups? Or potentially there's things like planking, the Russian twist, abdominal crunches, dead bugs. If you don't know of the exercises, then look them up. Have a look online. There's plenty of exercise videos around. I often share exercise ideas on my Tonia Trainer WordPress blog, which I will link in the title of this episode, so you can see that there. But there's plenty of information out there. And also another thing you can do is simply just park further away from where you're going and walk the rest of the way. So plan your journey knowing that you can, even if it's the school run, even if you're doing school collection, just park a little bit further away. If you're dropping off in the morning, exactly the same way. And I know that a lot of schools do encourage the children to park and walk. You could go for a walk after dinner. It's even a bike ride if you've got a bike, but you don't need to have equipment to do that. If you have, though, if you've got an exercise bike in your home that's currently acting as a clothes rack, get the clothes off it, get the dust off it, and just get on it. You can do 5 minutes when you get in from work. You can do 5 minutes after dinner. Like, it doesn't have to also be, I'm going to hammer away at this for hours, because if you think about it, adding up the total of all these little movement snacks, and that's why they're called snacks, it means the sum total of it will actually equal the health benefit. And what are the health benefits? Okay, housework even counts, just to tell you that. So get the vacuum out, just saying. Might need to say that to myself, actually. I don't find housework the most interesting. I have to put loud music on when I do it to stimulate myself to clean. I know some people love cleaning and housework. I'm not in that camp, I'm afraid. But I do it and remind myself it's great exercise. Dancing in your kitchen, right? Do you know what? I was dancing. I was dancing in my dining room on Saturday night. There we go. Just dancing. So what are the benefits? It reduces the risk of chronic diseases. It can help reduce your risk of developing chronic diseases such as heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and some types of cancer. That's reducing the risk, okay, of those conditions. Improves mood and energy levels. Yes, it can indeed. It has releases endorphins, which have mood boosting effects, boosting your metabolism. So movement snacking can help to boost your metabolism and burn more calories throughout the day. And now, even though I don't focus on calories, by and large, with the Live Yourself Better approach, I do focus on what we're eating and nutrition and the ability to burn calories after you've finished exercising. It's always going to be a bonus, isn't it? Improving sleep quality as well, because if you think about it, where you're sedentary, especially if you're sitting looking at a screen, it's doing all kinds of things to your brain. And really, our bodies, they haven't really changed massively in many centuries. So we're still basically set up in the same way, except our lifestyles have changed so dramatically. And if you think about the reason why we have so many problems with stress, with mental health, with all of the things that really afflict us now, I'm not saying that exercise is a cure-all for those things by any stretch, and every single one of those has its own story, but if it can help, then why not try it? And it can also enhance cognitive function. So it can help to improve your memory, your attention, and your decision making. So it's all good. If you're able to move, just move, right? Don't overcomplicate it. You don't have to call it movement snacking. Just move. Like, don't get caught up with any of the details of it. Just get yourself active, break up those long periods of sitting, and live yourself better. So there we go. Right, I shall move on to primal movements. And actually, with primal movements, these can be exactly the kind of movements you choose to do with your movement snacking. So the two go hand in hand, really. Okay, and finally, primal movements. If you can hear a little noise in the background, it's because my youngest is asleep behind me in the car. I'm just recording the podcast from the car this evening. So just to let you know, life's going on around me. Primal movements are the foundation of functional fitness. So in the same way I mentioned earlier with movement snacking, in the modern world where we're spending those countless hours sitting at the desks, driving in cars, interacting with screens, our bodies become accustomed to a sedentary lifestyle, or they don't actually. That's probably the wrong way to say it. Our bodies are still on alert and wanting to be utilised in the same way as they were many tens of thousands of years ago probably. But the lack of movement that we experience now due to our lifestyles and due to the requirements that there are on us daily, largely being ones that are sedentary, means that there is a rise in chronic health conditions such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease and some cancers. So to combat these issues, what can we do? And, we all know this, don't we? We know this. A lot of things, it's hard because I think it's not just knowing them, it's trying to understand why that knowledge isn't being utilised. And I think, as I spoke earlier, with the diet and fitness industry overcomplicating things, not every element of the diet and fitness industry, it's not a bad industry, it's a wonderful industry. But there's been certain commercial elements that have put ideas in people's minds that you have to go to great efforts to do exercise. And this isn't true at all. So enter primal movements. These are the fundamental building blocks of human movement. And they've ensured our survival through our evolutionary history. So the 7 primal movements are squatting. So that's where you lower your body towards the ground as if you're sitting in a chair. Bending, or hinge, as it's sometimes called, hinging. So that's such as when you're picking something up from the floor. Lunging, the act of stepping forward with one leg, bending both knees. Pushing, where you're extending the arms to press against an object. And pulling, drawing the arms toward the body, such as when rowing a boat, for example. Rotating, that's when you're twisting the torso, such as when you're turning around to look behind you, see what the danger is there, as you can imagine people would have done many moons ago. And finally, locomotion, so moving your body from one place to another. So that could be walking, running or climbing. Now obviously we're all differently abled, and there are people who won't be able to achieve all of those movements, right? So just do what you can from the selection. If one is beyond the limits of what you're physically able to do, then it's okay. You don't need to necessarily have to do the full set, right? It's just doing anything is going to help. And if you incorporate these movements into your exercise routines, you're going to have improved functional fitness. So what does that mean? Well, functional fitness, it's the movements that we perform in everyday life. So, for example, carrying groceries, climbing stairs and engaging in other physical tasks. And I have heard it said, for example, kettlebell exercises are great, swinging a kettlebell, but it doesn't really mimic an activity that you will use in your day-to-day life. Is that a reason not to do it? No. But you must also consider those functional movements which will just make your day-to-day life easier and could potentially protect against injury. Primal movements also strengthen muscles and connective tissues that are essential for power, agility and coordination. And they promote proper posture and alignment. And the thing I'll say about that is they promote proper posture and alignment where you're doing them correctly. So just make sure, for example, with bending, that you follow correct bending movements. Otherwise you can do yourself in an injury. But you can find plenty of useful resources online. The NHS has got lots of exercise guides online. I'd always say go for something like that, just to check your form. And of course you can always ask at your local gym or ask a personal trainer, and such as me. I'm very happy to check form for you. So there's plenty of ways to ensure that you're performing things correctly, and realistically you only need to have done that. You need to have your form checked now and again, right? It's not something every single time you exercise you need somebody standing there next to you. That's just not true. Of course, as well, the overall improved health. So primal movements can help to improve cardiovascular health, bone density and balance. So it's for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned athlete, if you're someone who has no desires to be a seasoned athlete and would just like to improve a little bit of your flexibility, a little bit of your ability to perform functional movements day to day. You want to walk up the stairs without getting out of breath, right? These are for you. But you must be consistent, and the recommendation is to incorporate them in 2 to 3 times a week. If you do this regularly, you'll notice an improvement in your strength, your flexibility and your overall well-being. But I would say that make sure you do those kind of movements in your movement snacking. And as I mentioned before, if you're waiting for the kettle to boil, just do a few squats. As long as you've got the space around you, safe to do so, you're able to perform the exercise, then do it. And don't sit and think about it. Don't overthink exercise. If you're actually sitting in front of the telly, then there's no reason that you can't get down on the floor and do some sit-ups, or do some lunges in front of the telly. There's so many, touch your toes. Try and touch your toes. If you can't do it yet, try and do it. And if you keep practicing, you may get closer to your toes. There's always a point to doing it. There's always a point to doing exercise. If you're waiting for a phone call, and if you're someone that was hanging around waiting for a phone call and get anxious about it, or time seems to be dragging, then you could do some movement there to make the time go a bit quicker, and it can decrease nerves and anxiety. And also, for all of the things that I've mentioned, they're especially relevant at the time of perimenopause and menopause, where we can experience a higher level of weight gain, metabolic changes and hormonal changes, all combined together, meaning that you need to work harder. And I don't mean work harder as in you need to pummel it harder, but that can be a factor. But you need to work harder at assessing your life and saying, how can I improve things? How can I change things? How can I influence some of these outcomes? We can't influence all of them, right? So please don't ever think I'm saying that. But I think where we can reduce our risk of getting certain diseases, why not be as healthy as we can be? And it's not a magic bullet, but when we take a holistic approach, as I mentioned earlier, and so you're looking at your nutrition, you're looking at your movement, you're looking at your sleep. I've done a separate episode. Episode 5 of Series 1 is about digital health. So do have a listen out for that one as well, because that's really important. Screens can play havoc with our internal systems and with mental health as well. So it's really important to take an assessment of that. But hopefully from today's episode, I've given you some more ideas and enlightened you about the principles of mindful eating, movement snacking, and primal movements. And I think all of those things combined together could potentially produce some great outcomes in terms of overhauling your lifestyle fitness. So thank you for tuning in to the Live Yourself Better podcast Series 1. This is actually the end of the first series, and it's been really, really interesting. I hope it's been enjoyable, and I hope you'll come back next year for Series 2. And I'm actually going to be going out and about and talking to some local fitness groups, potentially local businesses. If you're in the Boldmere or Sutton Coldfield, Wild Green area, Warmley, surrounding areas, or even a little bit further away, that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll come to you and we'll chat. So let me know, email me trainertonia@gmail.com. I'll put my email in the episode description, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd really like to feature some diverse voices on the next series, but for now I hope that you have a happy and healthy winter and a very happy Christmas and New Year, and I'll see you in 2024. You can find my website liveyoubetter.biz. That's live, LIVEUYOU, better, BETTER.BIZ. On there you'll find links to all of my social medias, information about me, how we can work together, and you can also subscribe to the website by email to receive exclusive offers, newsletters and updates from me. See you soon.